Hello, this is a Talk and Ideas interview. I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Philip Tagg, who is a retired professor of musicology from the Université de Montréal in Canada. But he also was involved and worked at the Institute of Popular Music at Liverpool University from its early days. And he started his academic career at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. So a very international career. He's one of the pioneers of the academic study of popular music and has written many books that have been quoted widely. So my first question is really, what took you down this path? So, you are somebody that took a particular approach to studying popular music, took it seriously, did really in-depth research. Why did you embark on this life project?
It's I won't say it's by chance, but it wasn't intentional, so to speak. It's to do with my situation socio-politically, so to speak, because I was I'm very middle class, as you can hear from my accent, and but we never had any money. My dad was a pacifist and and a mathematician, so he wasn't particularly good at joining a system and being a powerful person. So we never had the income to support our kind of cultural and intellectual way of life, if you want to put it that kind of way. You see, we had loads of cultural capital in Bourdieu's terms, but very little financial capital. So we had to live in two spheres, two socio-cultural spheres, which were quite different. I had to talk two different languages, didn't I? I had to speak like that when I was with my mates at the local school, and then I got sent to a posh school, so I had to learn, speak like I do now these days, BBC English. And I think that's, to me, that was not a worry, because the music was different in those two milieus. And so I never reflected on it. And besides, my dad was a great fan of Handel and Mozart, as well as, and a self-taught amateur pianist, as well as being keen on Glenn Miller and swing bands. So to me, there was never a contradiction in my own life. Because the contradiction was on the outside. The weird thing to me was this kind of these watertight categories of classical and popular,
But why did you gravitate towards the popular side?
Well, of course, nobody else was doing it. It seemed to me, very one-sided. So, you got to look at. I've always had a soft spot for the little guy, so I would gravitate more easily towards that side of things than, because there was plenty of people. There were plenty of people looking after, Mozart and Beethoven. They didn't need more people, but the people, but those of us who were into the Beatles in the early 60s, there were very few of us. So that's I think that's why, more than anything else. And I perceive there to be values in that music, especially when it came to the Beatles. It was much easier to do that, because they had a really interesting sense of harmony.
So since you were sort of on virgin territory, as it were, you kind of had to formulate your own way of doing it, because the sort of traditional musicological approach that doesn't really get you very far when you're looking at a pop song. So what kinds of analytical, conceptual approaches did you adopt?
Well, the first thing was, because I should add another thing here, which is the semiotic side of things. Because the jobs I used to do on the classical side, I was partially trained as a church organist. So I was one of those rare birds. You know, there's very few classically trained people that actually can improvise. But I had to be able to do that, you know, for church services. You know, if the bride is late, or if the corpse is late, you have to know how to extend the music. You know, using the correct character. You don't want people bopping up and down the funeral, or you know, or crying at a wedding. You know, so you've got to do it in the right mood. Well, that was one thing, you know, and if you've got to get the right mood going, then you're going to think of music as capable of communicating stuff, which was something that never got really talked about. At least it only got talked about in a very chaotic manner, very sporadic, pauschal, as the Germans would say, manner, you know, random and chaotic way in classical music. So that meant, yes, considering music as capable of communicating something other than itself.
Right.
And that was equally true for the classical repertoire as it was for obviously true for all the media music that was, you know, as people got their TVs in their homes, that became more of a regular thing. And of course, in the pop songs, it's quite obvious that music related to the words or to the action on screen and so on.
Yeah, but that was still before the advent of the new musicology, as it were. That was quite a novel approach.
Well, yes, there weren't. I can't think of many people. Well, I can only think of one really, and that was Wilfrid Mellors, who in the UK was doing it. I can't bring to mind any other people. I mean, what was done in the name of music semiotics in the 60s was very formalistic, basically. I mean, there were efforts by people like Nattier, Rouvet, and that's basically it. But they, you know, they tended not to. They tended to be very syntax oriented, you know, in terms of form and the restricted meaning of the word form, where they just mean episodic order of events. You know, and they didn't think of the episodes in themselves could have a dynamic meaning. You know?
Just the macro form, as it were.
Yeah, just the macro. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So one of the fascinating things about your work is that you focus in on you know, quite discrete, short pieces. So an ABBA song, for instance, or a television title music piece. You know, these can be only, you know, very few minutes long. And you do such a deep, rich, extensive analysis of them that it's just you know, amazing how far you take these things. And you know, how do you get so much out of you know, the Kojak Sig tune, or out of an ABBA song?
Well, it's very nice of you to say so, Jochen. Appreciate that. But some people would make it into quite a negative critique in saying that I'm taking far too many liberties. I'm making sort of interpretative or hermeneutic liberties. You know, I'm just going over the top. And sometimes you can level that kind of critique. I mean, I could do so at that great pioneer of music semiotics, in my opinion, Wilfrid Mellors. I mean, I could accuse him of being, you know, super or exaggeratedly hermeneutic on occasions. But, you know, I think it's better in these cases. It's a question of the lesser of two evils. I mean, you know, why not risk a bit of excessive exegesis rather than stay in the prison of zero meaning?
Yeah.
You know, maybe those theories of, even if they seem a little bit unreasonable or a bit over the top, they might lead in some direction. They can be falsified at least. So I think, yeah, I'd rather have something that dared to admit to music, even if you disagree with the interpretation of the scholar, you know. But what was I going to say? Yes, how can you possibly get so much out? You must be scraping the barrel, or you must be over interpreting, and you know you must be trying to prove the importance of your own work because you know you love doing it. Well, I make no bones about it. I do enjoy this work usually, but that's not why I insist on its importance. I insist on its importance because Mendelssohn did, you know. So Mendelssohn, who said it's Derek Cook, you know, another of the great slightly chaotic pioneers of music semiotics in the Anglophone world, who quotes Mendelssohn as saying, the problem with music is not that it is a vague art, but that, on the contrary, that it is too precise to be put into words. Excellent, you know, a moment of music is worth 1,000 pictures. You know, go eat that, McLuhan. So, but I think there's a lot of truth in that, and you can see that in the way, and that's one reason for my interest in title music, you know, or yeah, because in 1 minute, often they are like 48 seconds or 58 seconds or something.
I used to write them. I know.
What?
I used to write them.
Well, I mean, sometimes they are limited to 29 seconds.
Yeah, I know.
Have you done 15-second adverts as well?
Well, you know, yeah, you know, advert stings going to advert. So you know, you have the title sequence, and you might get a minute at the end of the program, but at the beginning, quite often it's limited to half a minute or less. Yeah. You've got this ongoing project doing an analysis of the NYPD Blue title music. And it's on your Vimeo channel where you've got lots of interesting videos. And I think there's an hour there at the moment, but it's not quite, I think there's going to be another edition.
Another 15 minutes, I reckon.
Right. And I mean, maybe can you talk about that a little bit?
I'd be delighted. But thanks for the advert for the site. You know, for the Vimeo. Yeah, just go if you're interested. Just go online and write Vimeo Tagg, and you'll come to it. Yeah, the NYPD Blue theme is by a guy called Mike Post, as in male Post, and he's written the title themes to many very well-known Hollywood TV products like L.A. Law or Hill Street Blues, or you know, I mean, those are very well known. That'll have to do. And he has a very American sound. He uses quite American sound. He uses Copeland chords, you know, slightly bitonal ones. Lots of 11 chords, that kind of thing. This one is particularly interesting. Firstly, for musical reasons. It has, you know, in its 60 seconds. It's actually 59. But it's in its 1 minute. It contains two extremely clearly distinct semiotic fields. One is a stressed up drum sound where you've got you know, the kind of drums that partly that have the sound of Peter Gabriel, the Rhythm of the Heat from I can't remember what year that album or which number the album was, Peter Gabriel's sequence of events. Never mind. But you know, there's a slight tribal, but it's not the main characteristic of the you know, semiotic characteristic of it. it's quite, these are quite stressed drums. They're less rounded in sound. They have a very specific timbre. And you see, the interesting thing is there that when he got the brief for the, sometimes composers get these completely weird briefs, Y-fronts as I call them, for writing a theme tune. So, and he went to Mulholland Drive in LA and met Steve Bochco, who died recently, as a producer, and Greg Hoblit, not Hobbit, Hoblit. So and Steve Bochco says, so they're chatting there over a beer. So he said, what do you want? He asks Bochco, what do you want? And he said, drums. As you know, Bochco asks Post, has there ever been a theme tune that was just drums? Just drums? And Post said, I don't think so. So, well, that's what I got to say, drums. And then he turns to the other producer and says, what do you say? And the other guy says, Subway, like the New York subway. And Post says, Subway and drums? Yep. Makes perfect sense to me. So that's what it is. It's subway and drums, not just in terms of the sound, not just you've got bang bang bang, which could have been quite a soft booming sound on powwow drums maybe, but it could have been a real good snare drum type clatter, big snare sound or tom sound, a la Phil Collins, It is come through the air tonight, I don't know if you remember that. But so there's this stressed kind of mechanical drum sound that is also a stressed tribal type sound and ongoing and relentless and it can't be stopped. So that's an important sphere, which is, if that starts at 0 seconds, it goes on until, by the time you get to 27 seconds, it's no longer really audible. It's been faded right down and just is ticking away in the extreme background. And then it's the foreground is taken over by a very smooth Vaughan Williamsy synthesized string pad using, 11 minus 7 and quartal chords, just going very smoothly. And they change notes. Instead of there being a new note every semiquaver, there's a new note every semi-breve.
Right.
So there's 16 times, like the movement is in one, even if the ticking is in the background. You have to have something rhythmic that keeps them together. So you've got a tempo. It's about 100. It's 118. But you got that tempo running, but the speed at which you change from A to B, it's divided by 16 basically. So and the timbre is totally different, and you have even an oboe or a cor anglais sound. You have a double reeded instrument. There's the melody, but just small motifs, nothing really kind of fancy or long at all, just 1 second motifs. And that, and then you can look at the tradition of oboe playing and pastorality in what Berlioz says about it, something le branle au champ, people in the fields, and then of course it's an awfully green thing. And then you wonder, why on earth has he done this?
Yes, I was just going to say, what's that doing in a subway?
Exactly. The same thing is because you need humanity. Because, Post reasons in the following way. He says, but then apart from the subway and the stress and the crime and I had to have, there were the cops. There was the humanity, he says, of the cops. it doesn't matter if you dislike or like cops or whatever, you know.
Well, it's about the characters, isn't it?
It's about the characters and that kind of sense of humanity, you know, especially with all their fallibilities, you know, with all their warts and all their faults, and he wants to portray their true humanity. What? Composer portray their true humanity? Yeah, sure. So instead of having people, okay, they live in the stress, but they're striving, you know, despite their problems with alcohol or their wives or whatever they got problems with. They're striving for, you know, something, a better world. There's a utopian aspect to their existence.
Right.
And they're also living in a community, whether they like it or not, or do we like them or not. It's irrelevant. They do try to act as a community. So Post has taken this, well, he calls it his Irish music, but it's not at all Irish, really. I think it's Irish because he knows that if you're not called Kowalski in the New York police force, you'll be called O'Reilly. but it's something that isn't. Yeah, it's the opposite end of the spectrum, of the social spectrum, of the corporeal or somatic spectrum, of the emotional spectrum, to drums. So it becomes like a counterbalance to the stress, and that's really important. Remembering that this theme and the whole of the series was constructed in the period just prior to the, well, it went off air in 2005, I think, you know, which was just prior to the collapse of the US capitalist system, you know, with the banking crisis in 2007, 2008. Because anything, you could do anything as a capitalist arsehole, you know, in those years, in those Clinton years. It didn't matter. No, of course, all counted was like the bank account, and it didn't matter if your hedge funds meant foreclosure and people couldn't afford their mortgage. It didn't matter, you know, expendable. It didn't matter if their jobs had all been sold to China, as long as the shareholders had made loads of money in that sale of all the stuff, all the iron which was once in Pittsburgh or Detroit was now in Wuhan. Who cared? You know, you can't beat the market. You can't. That was it, you know, and that sort of incredibly cynical and misguided notion of the unbeatable market, which obviously collapsed totally in 2008. You know, obviously. I don't need to tell you how ridiculous all of that is.
So you're thinking that that's expressed in those what you're calling stress drums.
I think so. I think the conflict is there at a personal level, as a shared personal level, so to speak, in the conflict between the stressed out drums and the utopian pastorality. You know, it's.
What's making so it's not the drums you're saying they're expressing this stress, or they're connoting this stress, and how are they doing that? Because it's not the drums themselves that are stressed, is it?
No, it's what they've been associated with. You know, if you need, you know, if I had to sit on Room 101, you know, the TV show,
yes,
where you can put your pet hates. You can ban them to Room 101, as in Orwell's 1984. One thing would be dramatic drums, as you know, for pathetic documentaries.
Right.
You know, and you'll hear somebody saying, "Well, the lesser spotted bit of the, in May is going to chase the females around the pond," you know, and they go, these incredibly stressed out drums sound like a Schwarzenegger movie on steroids, and all you've got is little birds. But they use these are used so frequently. You know, they're stereotypical memes, and they just, you know, you just bring one in. You want action. You want quick stuff. You want People to be involved and stressed
Yeah.
out. Yeah, put in a, put in that.
So it's a well-established association.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. I mean,
Okay.
it won't last forever. Any more than a word in language lasts forever in its original meaning. But a couple of generations, I'm sure it'll manage to carry on.
Well, I mean, a drum sound, tends to have a strong attack, doesn't it? So there's something, physically that, can be physically aggressive about it as well.
I think so. Yes, I think so. I mean, when you do an analysis from the structure of the music to its connotations, that is always the physical production.
Yeah, it's a little bit more motivated than language, isn't it? I think.
Yes, it's a bit closer. It is closer. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Do you want to go down that route?
No, let's not. I don't know. Okay. It's more one of my things than one of your things, really. So
it's fine. We can do that if you want.
I think I'd rather ask you. So you take this the sort of middle section that is expressing the humanity. I was particularly struck by you taking that to Vaughan Williams and to the idealism of that, this sort of the nostalgia for a pastoral idyll and so on, and then also the horrors of the First World War. And that's, of course I can make those connections because, I'm interested in Vaughan Williams and so on, but I was wondering whether it matters that a lot of people who will watch that won't be aware of, that music and that history and those connections. Does that bother you? Does it matter?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's very interesting because you can create, you can actually establish historical points of etymophony. You can say at this point, with Vaughan Williams, this particular connotation is well established. And you can point, by pointing to that in history, you can then make an argument for its continuation or its rejection or whatever. But it doesn't matter, I would be surprised if even 5% of listeners would think of Vaughan Williams.
Well, exactly, yes.
But that's not the point. It's like saying, did you realize when you used the word realize there, Philip, that réaliser and realiseren, do you know that the Swedish realisation actually means a sale? Like things going cheap. And do you mean that réaliser actually meant to put into practice, and not like understand in depth? So did you know that? No, most people don't think of it. If they're an English speaker, realize means understand in depth. But so what does it matter? Do you really need to know the etymological or etymophonic history of things? No. But it does help if you're trying to establish a history of changes in meaning, over time. Because with the I mean, you can take the pastorality back inside the European tradition. It's difficult to take it back to in its present meaning further than the Industrial Revolution, where a particular type of contrast exists or comes into existence between the rural and the urban, so to speak. But the rural-urban split, was even there in Plato's time, and pastorality in Virgil or in Hesiod in ancient Greece. These would be, I don't know how to say Hesiod. I think it's Hesiodos in Greek. Hesiod. He did some stuff with that. So the pastoral stuff. I mean, Plato. There's this stuff about the. They argue in the Republic about let the shepherds have their flutes. So so it goes back a long way.
I mean, I can certainly see how, in the context of a New York, subway, and the rampant, robber capitalism, and the drums, that sort of pastoral interlude is is a beautiful kind of escape from all that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it's very clear as well. It's so clear the contrast, musically clear. The contrast is absolutely crystal clear, and it makes for it enables that kind of reflective frame of mind, even if it only goes on for 20 seconds, so to speak. That's enough time in which to establish reflection as a mode of being, meditation even as a mode of being, which contrasts with the stressed up thing. And then we all long for that, that gentle, calm type of mode of being in the middle of the stress. It's not surprising. Why else would he do? Why else would he bother to do it? It's not what you expect for an action show or a crime show. You expect action. You expect action.
Yeah.
Not reflection.
Yeah. It's interesting actually how different that Sig tune is from the Hill Street Blues one, which is also Mike Post, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's I think there are a lot of similarities between them. Obviously, it's Mike Post.
Really?
Yeah, it's Mike Post too.
Yeah.
But he's done. He's been much more. You see, there's a difference in time, the time at which in history when these were written. Okay, this is a tricky one, but the Hill Street Blues theme tune is very much based on the tonality. I don't mean tonality in the stupid sense. I mean on how tones are regulated in it. So you have plenty of bitonal chords, E flat triads on top of A flats in the bass, and that sort of thing. It can go the other way. You can have instead of an E flat on top of an A flat, you can have you can have a G flat on top of an A flat.
Yeah.
So you can have it 1 or 2 on the flat side and 1 or 2 on the sharp side of the home key.
Yeah.
So to speak. And that's part of it. And also it's very thirdy. It's lots of tertial movement in there, parallel sixths, parallel thirds, which there aren't any of basically at all in the because the drums are just drums. Yeah. With one minor exception, and the pastoral section is all either fifths and ninths or fourths. It has very little by way of. There's very little tertial in that section. So so why are they so different? I think the first one, but similarly, the similarities are on the narrative level. Where we have a cast, a community cast. Yeah. You have the police precinct in both cases, with its own internal structure, and you have a dynamic between the individuals of it. In the first case, it's much more of a family thing. In NYPD Blue, it becomes more stressed and more let's say more intense and in need of the human touch. Because that's what life had become. Thanks to Tony Blair and Bill Clinton after Mrs. Thatcher. It's exactly what had happened. Things got worse, not better.
I mean, the NYPD Blue that seems just more fragmented, more postmodern, I guess. I think Hill Street Blues, to me, it's like it's a coherent, it's got a melody, it's got that main that 3 notes figure which goes, which is continuous throughout it really, and then it modulates somewhere and it comes back, and it's kind of, it's a coherent, it's a tune, with a harmonized tune, whereas NYPD Blue is like, it's a collage really.
Yeah.
So that kind of surprises me that it's by the same guy, because it just has a completely different approach as far as I can see.
But I think the technology of music making, of composing, went through quite a number of changes. This might have influenced that. Hill Street Blues is from 1981, whereas NYPD Blue is from 1995.
Right.
Or thereabouts. That means that it was much easier, the channel separation, the use of synthesizers and sampling and so on was much easier in the 14 years between those two productions. So you could use timbre and unconventionally musical elements in your composition, sonic elements. The other thing is that things got worse, and the chummy aspect of a police precinct collective, so to speak, with shared values and so on, even if they were kind of quite racist and sexist at times, were nevertheless, they were considered chummy, and nice. So, come on, guys, let's be careful out there, being the operative comment. Whereas by the time you get to 1995, you've had all sorts of evil things happen in addition to what was already going. In 81, you've had the Enron scandal and other terrible examples of corruption and evil. And I think, the police trying to get their act together and act humanistically to make this society run properly, also with the minor improvements in political correctness, which made it impossible to just regurgitate the chumminess of I think it would have been sounded very false if they tried to regurgitate that family fun of Hill Street Blues, so to speak. They needed to get the stress and was important, because it got so much worse for the average US American. Things got so much worse in the intervening 14 years, with employment and so on. So they needed to have that clear, and then the humanity, he had to stuff that into the pastoral section.
Right.
And then that became very clear. And I think that downward spiral for the US economy and for the life of average US individuals, I think that made the NYPD theme, quite iconic in its historical situation.
Yeah. So you're relating these pieces of music to wider developments in the culture, and it reminds me of some of the work in ethnomusicology, which looks at music in culture and relates it to the culture as a whole, and what's happening in other spheres. So I'm wondering how you see your approach in relation to, for instance, ethnomusicology, traditional musicology, approaches to popular music that come more from the social sciences. But where do you position yourself within those things?
Well, like any good egocentrist, I see myself in the middle. And I see the others as extremes, so to speak. But they all, of course, see me as an extremist and, unreliable, what's it called? Unpredictable, maverick, so to speak. But no, I think the important, I think your question is an important one, because I feel a lot of affinity for ethnomusicological method, simply because you can't explain the role, or yeah, you can't explain the culture of a foreign or unfamiliar culture without explaining the relationship between the nuts and bolts of that culture and its meaning in that culture. So there's that dynamic that needs to be mapped and analyzed. And you need to see the changes in the relationship between the structural elements and their cultural uses or social uses. Now, I think that's one of the great things that ethnomusicology offers. And I remember asking Dave Lang, unfortunately he's the late Dave Lang now, a sociologist of music, Lang. Back in the around the turn of the millennium, how did he explain the lack of interest for anything musical? The concretion of the sonic materiality that is music, because it has. You need airwaves to be. You need sound waves, and there has to be something physical going on. How come that had been dropped or ignored from studies that come out of sociology? Weren't they aware of ethnomusicology, for example? And Dave said, and I think it's really interesting, he says, no, they weren't at that time. And the only thing they were aware of was Adorno, which is a real shame, because, the guy had no idea about popular music, none whatsoever. He's just an incorrigible Hegelian, in the most elitist fashion. But for radicals in sociology, no wonder they wanted Adorno, because Adorno never bothered about the music. He didn't know the music. He says the most idiotic things about the music sometimes. I don't want to go into a critique of Adorno now, but it's amazingly badly informed on popular music, über den Jazz, it's just dreadful. So there's a problem there, but that's all they could do. And Adorno was fine for those people because he never mentioned the music, so they didn't need to bother about diminished sevenths and program presets or or pentatonicism or whatever. None of that kind of muso jargon they didn't need. And that's the problem with the popular music studies people in the social sciences, is that for understandable reasons, they haven't been taught about diminished sevenths, about pentatonic, that sort of thing. So their knowledge of musical structure is very limited. And then the other thing, which is a corollary to that, is that even if they did have a basic knowledge of let's say, conventional music theory, that would get nowhere. It wouldn't get you very far in the study of popular music, which often does not use the same kind of criteria in its production. We already noticed how the production of Hill Street Blues in '81 is very different, even in the work of the same composer in 1995 with NYPD Blue. So why should observations of musical structure created by people like Forkel in 1805 have any validity in 1895, let alone in 2015? There's no reason why that should work. So that's the other point that I feel very strongly about and quite lonely in relation to is the lack of understanding amongst my musicology colleagues. Many of, not all, but many of my musicological colleagues, for the incredible ethnocentricity music theoretical terminology in the West, in Europe, in North America. It's just it's astounding. Don't let me go there. You know.
No, go there. Go there.
Well, I'll just give you a couple of examples.
Yeah.
You know, the most horrendous is the word tonality, by which if I was to say English is a language, nobody would disagree with me there. And I say French is also a language, and maybe German too, because, well, you know, they all have a word for the definite article. You know, several words for definite article. Go to German.
Yeah, too many.
And then you say, but no. And then I say, well, yeah, but I'm not talking about Russian and Persian and Finnish, and of course not Mandarin Chinese or Hokkien Chinese, come to that. They don't have, of course, they don't have proper definite articles, so they're not language. But that's exactly what we do with tonality. We say that, you know, if you have perfect cadences, 5/1 cadences, that is, if you have 12 notes per octave, separated by 100 cents each, and you know all that. That's tonality. And if your chords, if you can simultaneously play notes that are situated at a third from each other, you know, above or below each other, that's fine. You know, that's how you make triads. Yeah, wonderful. But if you can't call notes, but anything else that works on other principles, which is most music in the world at all times, most, you know, it's like 98% of the music that's ever been produced. That's other music. You know, those are foreigners. We don't want to deal with foreigners. That's not good enough. Sorry, that's just not good enough. So we have to have tonality, meaning it should mean any system according to which tones are organized in music. It doesn't matter which type of music or how they're organized, you know, because it's quite different. And we shouldn't be so ethnocentric about it. The other thing is that triads are always, that means, like a tetrad means a chord containing 4 notes with different names for the notes, you know, so you don't get octave, and pentad 5, and of course then a triad means 3 notes with different names, like C, E, and G. So that's fine. That's a triad. But then you have C, F, and G, which is, or C, D, and G, which can often be the final chord in quartal tonality. You know, things like the Kojak theme, if you like, where C 1 2 5 is the last chord. You know, and 1 4 flat 7 is you know, and 11 chords. You know, they're all the way through, so to speak. It's some variant of quartality. But they are triads. If they've got 3 different notes in there, so you have quartal triads, you have tertial triads, you have tertial tetrads, you have quartal tetrads, and so on and so forth. But no, only. But then you have. I've heard colleagues talk about triadic music. They don't mean triadic music because they're not thinking of Bartok or Hindemith or McCoy Tyner or Miles Davis. They're not thinking of them. They're thinking of
major chords.
Yes, exactly. So, but they can't see themselves as you know, almost being racial stereotypes.
Yeah. So I mean, so you're relating that use of language to a kind of colonial ethnocentric attitude. So reforming it is you know, should be part of the project of decolonizing the academy, the music academy.
Absolutely, I think so. Thank you. I'll vote for that. I've tried to do something about it anyhow. But I don't make many friends. Right. The friends I do make are real friends because they understand. Yeah, this is ridiculous. You know. Yeah. This is so ridiculous. It's actually embarrassing. You know, if we were to do the same thing with language, and talk in this way about language, we'd be shot, you know.
Mm.
People have been shot for less.
Mm.
Okay, there's triads and tertials and quartals and so on, but then there's other stuff. Form is another one, where we don't talk about form at any level that is shorter in duration than the episode. You know, episodes being, you see, I mean, I make a distinction between two types of form. Excuse the jargon, but there's not diacritical, diatactical, because there's diataxis and there's syncresis. Syncresis is stuff that happens in the now. I mean, isn't that, you know, things that happen in the now that are in the extended present, that last for a breathing in and a breathing out, an in and exhalation, or there are two steps, or, you know, a short pattern of dance steps, or there are a short pattern of instrumental gestures, you know, these sorts of things. I mean, I can give you any number of examples of that. My favorite being from Arab modal theory of the maqam, where maqams are organized on where their first interval, how their first interval feels on a lute, on an oud,
right,
you know,
right.
And that's how they're named, you know. So that this one starts like that, and then they have variants depending on what other notes they contain. Anyhow, but those are aspects with the vocabulary of music in the now, where a continuation or a finality, you know, isn't considered. And then I see you can't have notions of narrative and continuation and development if you don't have notions of now, because where is it going to where does it pass through? You know, things have to pass places in order to get to the next place, and then some music is designed to be, you know, a huge kind of landscape painting where you don't pass through your eye may pass, but you're stuck in one position. The camera and the artist is in one position, and the viewer is in one position. You can zoom in on this or zoom in on that, but it's not meaningless where you know, just because it's still, so to speak. You know, it's not motionless even. It's full of motion. Like most popular music, it consists of really quite complex combinations of timbre, of chords, of notes, and the metric relationship between those elements. So that how a riff goes round, you know, is just essential to its character.
Absolutely.
So a form means the combination of elements into a whole. That's what a form is. You know, the Oxford Dictionary tells me that. So if you have such combinations of elements, they don't have to be combinations of elements that are sequential over a long period of time, as in the restricted musical theoretical notion of form, meaning verse, refrain, verse, or whatever, or A, B, A, you know. So you have to expand that too. Right. When all of these notions are so restricted just as to encompass the validity of one or two styles or genres of music, then we're in a very sad position. So we have to expand them.
Absolutely. We could come to a close, and I'd like to ask you what plans you have for the future.
Well, I don't have much future left, being 77 basically. But what I'd like to do in the little time that I have left, if I am spared, so to speak, which is a quote from an Orlando Gibbons anthem. Yeah, I'd like to finish the NYPD Blue video and maybe do another one or two. I don't think I'll have time for much more. I don't really want to write any more books or re-edit any more books. I'm fed up with trying to be coherent in verbally coherent, I think. But you know, I quite like doing these things like this interview. You know, has brought some pleasure. Talking to somebody who, thank God, understands is always a brilliant. Yes, it's always nice.
Thank you.
So I'll do more of that if ever you want, or you know.
We could find something to argue about, maybe.
That would be nice too. You know, of course, a good kind of. I don't mean a conflictual argument, but something where there's some degree of disagreement. I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a great pleasure to talk to
Likewise.
you and to listen to you. Well, all the best. I'm looking forward to the rest of the video, the NYPD Blue video. It looks great anyway. I really enjoyed watching it. So it's on Vimeo. And yes, Philip Tagg, thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you, Jochen. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.